So it should be coming. I think yes, we are live. Hi, Katherine.
Okay. Hi, Pascal.
How is it going?
Everything fine. How are you?
Everything's fine. Perfect. Everything's perfect.
Right. Let's get
Always,
started.
always great pleasure to discuss with you these topics, hot topics, nice topics, mediation, negotiation today. This is the piece of the puzzle podcast together with Katherine and myself, podcast on mediation, conflict transformation, and today negotiation. We are talking about this book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Uh, it has been published 2016. And yeah, Chris Voss is a former FBI negotiator, had a quite impressive career on different levels in the FBI, and I think also other institutions. And he explains how he got into negotiation. It's also a little bit a book about his own career. No? It
Mhm.
talks about different
Mm.
steps and how he managed to make new steps in his career and so on. It's quite interesting, easy to read. Each chapter is introduced with the practical experience from a negotiation case, different situations he had, like a bank robbery or terrorist groups and like various things. So it's quite interesting and yeah, actually easy to read. But it is on negotiation, not on mediation. So I think a couple of people might confuse the two terms or the two approaches, and maybe that's one of our objectives today to bring a little bit of order into that. Is that the right way to put it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's also interesting to see what are the techniques that can be used in both processes, or are there some techniques that shouldn't be used in mediation, for instance? So I think maybe to just be clear, so this is, as you said, on negotiation and sort of quite classical negotiation settings, high stake negotiations often, like kidnapping cases.
Hmm.
This is why I think the subtitle of the book is Negotiating as if your life depend on it. Um, but it's often a one-on-one negotiation setting. It is also not like in a mediation with an impartial third party trying to resolve the conflict. So the negotiator obviously comes in negotiating for one side. And so I think that is really, really important to keep in mind as we go and walk through the different tools that are being used and approaches that are being described, because clearly
Yeah,
that's different from mediation.
yeah, and maybe also a trigger warning for the listeners if you want to read the book. So we are going to talk about the book. So if you want to read it. Without knowing about it beforehand. So you should, I don't know, maybe not listen to to the podcast, or you can listen to it and then read it under this viewpoint as well as you like. But so the trigger warning being made. Um, yeah, I also had the impression by reading it. Yeah, Chris also he explains how I think we can say how he introduced this new model of negotiation. Uh, he's talking about the Harvard model, which seems to be one of his like first models he learned in negotiation that he knew, and I think is obviously one of the early and important models. But according to him, as I understood, was not sufficient for his specific context. So that's why he wanted to develop it further and adding it a more emotional component to it. I think he found it too rational, the Harvard win-win model,
Mhm.
which personally I'm not so sure. I think it's up to you as a negotiator to put the emotions into it or not. Yeah, but that's how he presents it. Um, yeah, and then I don't know if now it's an official use tool, but I think it was developed as an approach in the FBI based on, among others, his contribution.
Yeah. I
Um,
think it was, I think he came really from the FBI, from this FBI negotiation model that had been developed probably on the basis of the Harvard model, but using other techniques that are probably more police
hmm,
based, also sort of interrogation techniques. So I think in
coercion.
that sense, right, this is sort of also the background, I think sort of the professional background FBI negotiators, maybe not everybody, but I think it's also in the culture in a way. And I think he realized that a very, as you say, rationally based approach was not enough, and it was quite narrow. I think he felt that the FBI negotiation model was quite narrow in a way and didn't allow for enough space to negotiate.
Yeah, and there were over 2 million copies sold. Because also I think we can consider it as some kind of, I don't know if introduction is the right term, but it's true that for me as an experienced mediator, I had a couple of reminders, some new things as well, really good new things, new approaches, new points of viewing it. But also a couple of times reminders, things that are actually very common in mediation, different approaches and tools that we use. And that's what we're going to see. So with what do we want to start, Katherine?
Yeah, no, same. I think it's not if you are a trained mediator and have worked a while with mediation or on mediation, this is not mind-blowingly new. I think it's just interesting because it brings in a really different perspective because it comes from a pure negotiation standpoint. And I think, Pascal, I don't know what you felt, but when I read the book, I felt it was also quite, forgive me that I say that, but it felt American in a way. The approach to it as well. And I think maybe one thing that I thought about, we can maybe start with it because it really touches.
You mean, sorry, by American, you mean, I had a bit the impression it's not lacking confidence, if that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, no, I think, well, but I think there's also a difference in style, sort of an Anglo-Saxon approach maybe to negotiations and to mediation, and then more like sort of a European continental, if I can say that. I'm not an expert in comparative mediation approaches, but no, it's clearly it's bold in a way, and it's also, yeah, which is not necessarily bad, and just it's I guess it's also, it makes it kind of interesting to read and fun to read in a way.
That's true.
Yeah, but one thing that I started to think about while reading it is because he describes high stake negotiations, and where really a life of a kidnapped hostage is at stake, and you have to function under a lot of pressure. And I thought, what about humanitarian negotiations? So not mediation, but like really similar settings where, I don't know, a humanitarian convoy needs to go through a checkpoint to deliver food to people. And if this convoy can't get through, people will also die. So very similar setting, very high stakes as well. And clearly also not a mediation setting, because the convoy, the people leading the convoy are the ones that negotiate the passage through, right? So for the goods. And I thought, how much is actually the sort of the more commercial negotiation or the FBI negotiations, and how much is the model really transferable to a specific setting of humanitarian negotiation? And I think the main difference that I felt was that in Chris Voss's approach, the negotiation objective in itself is purely transactional. And I think that makes it the whole book limits it in a way to, I think, the world of mediation, but also humanitarian negotiation, where it's always also relational. And I think in particular in mediation, you would always have, ideally, at least, a transformational component.
Yeah.
Right? And this is not part of the book at all. And I think in this sense, it's less complex. I think in different situations, the conflict is so much more complex. But I also think that, so you always have a relational aspect and a relation maybe to look at or to heal in a way, right?
I think
and that's totally missing.
It is a logical consequence. What you're saying, that is more transactional than transformational. It's, I guess, a logical consequence of the context, because as you said, life is at stake, and actually failure is not an option in these settings, as well as humanitarian negotiation. Whereas in most negotiations, it is voluntary, it is open-ended, because here you have to succeed. The result is already known. You have to get the hostage out. The result, the result that you want is known from the beginning.
Yeah.
Which in pure mediation, you don't know the result, you don't know the process.
Yeah.
You might suspend it, you might take it up, I don't know, 6 months later or 1 year later. So that's probably one of the
It
reasons
is,
for that.
yeah, definitely. But I think in a humanitarian negotiation setting, the example that I gave of a convoy needing to go through a checkpoint to really get food to people that are being deprived of it is a similarly high stake setting.
True.
Where still you would have a relational aspect in a way, because it's not a one-time thing and then it's done, right? So it's part of a broader picture of an ongoing conflict of people that may still live in the same area that need to be living with each other later on. So I think clearly that is different. But yeah, important point I think that you highlight in regards to mediation, and how in mediation, I think we are also really taught in the way we learned it that the outcome, it cannot be known.
Yeah.
And that it's the parties who really have to find it.
Yeah. And that also explains probably several tools, or at least titles. I'm thinking about the one tool which I found surprising, which is called tactical empathy.
Yeah.
So empathy, of course, in mediation, empathy is crucial. Understanding emotions, validating emotions, and I think that's what he means. That's how he says it, was in his book. But I'm a bit disturbed by the tactical.
Yeah,
from
me too. I had
perspective.
exactly the same reflection. Yes, yeah. Because it seems instrumentalized, right? It doesn't seem genuine if you call it tactical empathy.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, because you use it for a specific result. It makes sense again in his context.
Yeah, he has some of these sentences, right? He also says, how to bend the other side's reality, or how
Exactly.
to shape what is fair. And I'm wondering whether there's a deliberate move of throwing quite controversial statements out, because when you then read it, it's not very, it still resonates with the work we're doing in a way. It's not contrary in a way, but the title or how he labels it is a little bit, in French, I would say, agent provocateur.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, exactly. Bend the reality. Yeah, a couple of examples that I wrote down from the book is like anchoring, that you set you anchor things, like anchoring in a sense, you put out the figure or an emotion which gives already a certain framework. This type of things, how he uses the idea of bending the reality. But I'm not shocked by the term in itself, bend the reality, in that sense that, maybe we could rather call it thinking outside of the box, or, open up opportunities, or, because you might be really limited in your reality if you're in a conflict situation. And then one of the tasks of the mediator is to open up, to open up the space and give new opportunities and new insights. And so the title as such does not shock me. But then again, the tools are more, giving new frameworks, especially going for your own objective. That's maybe also an important point. It's about my own objective. It's not so much about what is our common objective, which again is obvious. You're a hostage negotiator. You have to get the hostage out. So I have to do everything to get to my goal, which in mediation, at least it's not the mediator's objective. And you have to get the parties to a point where they find common objectives.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think maybe what is sort of in a little bit, at least sort of for the FBI approach, and maybe for a more classical previous negotiation style, that he debunks a little bit the idea of a compromise, right? This is also what is reflected in the title, Never Split the Difference. And yeah, do you remember the examples in the book?
Yeah, what example was the one with the two pairs of shoes? Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let me recall it. So there is a couple. You correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a couple, and he prefers the brown shoes, and she prefers the black shoes for him. And the compromise is that he wears one black and one brown shoe, which is the worst of all options. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's why he said compromise is often the worst of all options. Which I mean, it's an extremely illustrative example, but I guess we can find other examples where the compromise is actually better than some other
Yes.
options.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely. And shall we state the orange example?
Please.
Maybe for those who don't know it, because I think the orange example highlights why not per se that a compromise is bad, but it points to something else, which I think he's a little bit when he talks about why compromises are not good, I think he misses maybe out on explaining a little bit more why that is. So the orange example is two children fight around an orange and it gets very nasty, and the parents come in and say, let's cut it in the middle so you both have half an orange and then just stop it.
Compromise. Yeah.
Compromise, exactly. Let's split it in the middle, you each get a half, and that solves the problem. And when the parents do that and split the orange in half, both children continue to be annoyed and are not at all happy with the solution. And when the parents inquire, why do you actually need the orange? They find out that one child needed the juice to drink it, and the
Mm,
other wanted to use the peel to bake a cake with it. And
mm,
so clearly, like the compromise has worked to some extent, but clearly had the parents investigated further and actually asked what the underlying need is, why the orange was needed and what sort of the interest was, they would have found an even better solution, right? And I think this is his point, this is Chris Voss' point
yeah.
as well, is if you go dig deeper and understand the needs of each side, you're in a position to find the right solution, and the compromise is not necessarily the right one.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I had one point which again, as I said, I think as an experienced and trained mediator, there are a couple of techniques. You say, okay, I know this, I heard this in a different perspective, with different words or different titles. A couple of things are also, at least for me, were really new. And one point I liked a lot was the importance of no.
Yeah.
Um, so, and as I understood it, like he's saying that maybe start with the yes. He's actually saying a yes might be a bad answer in a sense that it might be um, actually a closing because it's a yes, but like a,
Mhm.
how to say, an unserious yes. It's a yes to actually evade things and stop the discussion and say yes, but then there is no follow up. So that's a bad yes. But the
Mhm.
no, on the other hand, is a starting point. A no can be a safe
Mhm.
space. So
Mhm.
somebody saying no, that might hide the need for safety, for control, but from there you can bring it further. So, and I think this is a really good point, also in terms of our attitude. A no is not a closing and, okay,
Yeah.
we're blocked somewhere. No, it's actually the opening of something.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a moment of, safety that the person needs. And now from there, how do we get further?
Yeah. And I totally agree. For me, this was also really an eye opener in a way, because we're not necessarily taught that. And I think also, so we have to train ourselves to be able to listen to a no and to accept a no. And as you say, it actually opens up opportunities in a way. And in a way, it can be more honest. So it's definitely preferable to have an honest no than have a dishonest yes,
Hmm. Hmm.
like a yes, but. So definitely for me it was similar that I read it and I thought like, that's interesting. That's definitely something to keep in mind, and how you interpret the no of the other side. Yeah.
Yeah. Another, yes. Yeah, another very illustrative point was the black swan. which has nothing to do with, well, almost nothing with the Black Swan that we know from this, I don't know, the author from this other book, very famous one. Talib is his name, no?
Or from the ballet, right? From the Swan Lake.
Yeah, definitely different from the Swan Lake.
Yeah.
Also, but then I also find it really illustrative. So for Chris Voss, the Black Swan is a hidden truth or unknown factor that once discovered is so opening up something new. It's like a breakthrough. And one example is that in a kidnapping negotiation, the hostage taker's girlfriend was pregnant, which when this came up, I don't remember how it came out, but like that this is emotionally such a more important moment, maybe it allows for a connection or, that it's a shift. It's a, maybe that would be a transformational moment, what you referred to earlier in the discussion.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think he also noticed that what you needed to find out the black swans, to have these moments where you get to know some of the unknowns, that you really need to continue having a very curious, open mind. And I think this is something that really counts true whether you're in a mediation process or negotiation process. I think quite often we go into a situation and we think we know it, or at least after having talked or listened more than talked to for a while to the other side, we feel like, okay, now we have a feeling and now we know what's going on. But to really deliberately always remind ourselves we know very little, we continue to know very little, and what else could be out there. And I think he really points out that the more ears you have in a process, in a conversation, the better. And he also, I think, points that out, that sort of some of the negotiations that went better, where, for example, the FBI had more leverage to then really, discuss terms, was when several people listened in and re-listened to some of the conversations, and where there was a genuine interest in trying to find out more about the other person as a person as well.
Yeah. I wrote down something about this. I don't remember if that's my words or Chris' words, but what I wrote down about this is like symbolically speaking, it's like if the negotiation partner, like the other party, would be there in several persons, like one is verbal, the other one is non-verbal, the other one is emotional. I like that a lot, symbolically speaking, how you don't just see one person, you have to see several persons.
Yeah. No, definitely.
So what's for you the take-home note for mediation? What's, I don't know, most important point, or would you say, okay, this is absolutely new, this is an amazing tool for me, or what do you take home from the book for your practice as a mediator?
So I think that, as you said as well, I think nothing was entirely new. But I think the way he framed certain things were giving me new ideas, or just reminded me also of the importance of certain things. So definitely, I think the no, this holding the space for the no, I thought that was eye-opening. I like that. And I think you can use that in any kind of setting. I'm going to try that at home as well. I'm going to report back how good that works. So that is definitely good. And I think the other one, we talked about this a little bit, the art of questioning. He talks about calibrated questions, which are specific questions that are not only open-ended questions, which we also learn in mediation, right? The importance of open-ended questions to really get to know the other person and the needs behind the position, for instance. But he really talks about not only open-ended, but using how in particular as a question word a lot, and even really saying things like, how could I possibly do this? Like inviting the other side to really come up with a solution. And I think that is in a specific negotiation setting, that can be very powerful, because you basically, as you said that earlier, it's like saying, I can't do that. but it's not that actually, because
Yeah.
you play the ball back and you give the feeling of control to the other side and opening up really the opportunity to find a solution.
Yeah.
So I think that was really it's quite a small technical point, but I thought it was a good one. Yeah, I think these were maybe some of the points. As you said, for me the tactical empathy is an issue in mediation, and I would still say there's a fine line because he really uses what sort of the power of information. So there's examples that he gives where, for instance, he was negotiating and not getting anywhere, and then he found out that the other person was Christian, and then he used that aspect in his favor and talked about faith and religion, and he used it clearly just to get to his goal. And things like this, I
Yeah.
find for mediation, is this ethical? Can we do this? Is it all right to basically use information in our favor just for the sake of it? And he basically says, this is how humans function. We would rather assimilate with the ones that are similar to us, so we belong together. So he basically makes the point and says it's just normal human behavior, and he uses it. He uses how the sort of the psyche functions. But to me, like, these are ethical considerations that are in mediation a little bit different than in a negotiation setting. So that is maybe just something that I took away as well in terms of.
This refers to another point I liked a lot in the book, is the a couple of tools to create rapport, which, and I think that comes back to a question: is this valid? Is this ethically possible in mediation? I would say yes. I think it's yeah, it is legitimate to create a good relation, and because it's not about manipulation. It's not about bringing the person to a certain outcome. I mean, if you do that, then at some point it becomes manipulation, and then I think it is not acceptable anymore. But if it's to create rapport and a good relation with the parties, and you do it with both, and the outcome remains their decision and so on, then I think yes. I mean, what I learned in my mediation training is even to create rapport, like physically, like connecting with the movements, like you kind of copy, if like the person is like this, you are like this. I mean, it should not look silly. You don't do it too obviously, but you can do it on one or two movements. That also creates a connection. At least in my training, I learned that, and I personally, I find it legitimate to do that.
I think what really is sort of the key point here is the intention behind. I fully
Absolutely.
agree with you. So if the intention is to establish connection, 100%, we have to do it. It's the whole idea that we connect, I think. And this is empathy. You
Absolutely.
can't
Yeah.
develop empathy without connection. But if the intention is to get to your goal,
To get the
and this
hostage
is
out.
why right? So I think it really depends on the attention that you as a negotiator or mediator have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What were some of the points that you take away in addition to what we said already?
I was actually thinking when you said that you will try some things at home, I said I have to try it at home, but at home I am the hostage, with my kids. One is going there, the other wants me to, everybody wants me to do something. So somebody has to get me out. With
I like that.
all the different expectations at home, I sometimes feel like the hostage. But more seriously than that, yeah, for me it was definitely a very good reminder for many things, many tools, techniques, um, and then some couple of new tools like what you said about the no, or also the black swan. That's something I mean, experienced it, but I didn't have a name for it. At some point I had a negotiation where something like that happened when two parties, where one was, uh, it's like a criminal mediation, a penal mediation, where according to the police, file, there is one person probably guilty and the other one is the victim. So there is an imbalance. And that was the setting of the mediation, an imbalance. But when the potentially guilty person explained how he was also suffering from that and how much he had to have psychological support and that how many kilos he lost over the last weeks since that happened, that totally changed the setting. There was a kind of a black swan, but I didn't have a name for that.
Yeah. Yeah, but it showed like the importance of you coming in with a curious mind and with an open mind and with being ready to listen to the story and not come in and say like, oh yeah, this is what happened. This person is the guilty one. And because clearly this person was the one that was, accused. So I think this is a good reminder.
Let me ask you a mediator's question. From 1 to 10, on a scale from 1 to 10.
Oh, is that a mediator's question?
Well, try to hide it.
Oh, that's a tough one.
It's a hard question now.
Yeah, because it has different categories. So I think on the joy of reading, the ease of reading, I would say it was really high. It was like an 8 for sure, because it was interesting to read, easy to read, fun to read in a way. Lots of examples.
I'd even say 9.
Yeah, 9. Yeah, but apart from that, relevance for mediation, 7 maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's very relevant. It's
8.
It is very relevant. It's at least for beginners. If you start mediation, you will learn many things, definitely. Good.
All right. I don't think we have any questions, right? I mean, they are obviously, the book is not super new, and there's if people don't want to read it but get a quick overview, there's different not book talks but little summaries out there. I think that can be read. Clearly not looking at how it plays out in mediation, but more generally. Some of the lessons learned for people. Yeah,
and also I think we also should not forget that now we had a look at it from a mediator's perspective, but that's not the intention of the book. It's for negotiators, and that's what he says. You can use it in any type. You buy a car, you do whatever, negotiate your salary, and for that I think it's extremely good.
Yeah.
So we have seen it from another point of view.
Yeah.
But no, I would buy it again.
Okay. I was actually also, this was a question for me in the end that I thought to ask is like, should I read it? If somebody was asking, should I read it? And I could wholeheartedly recommend it, in particular, as you say, for people who have not necessarily worked with the topic forever and who are just interested in what negotiation is and how, and maybe more broadly communication and relational aspects.
Good, perfect.
Okay, all right.
It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Do we want to highlight already our next episode in 2 weeks?
Yeah, you have to do it because I forgot. You mean the date or the topic or?
Maybe it's premature. I'm not sure. I think we will surely meet in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
With an interesting topic. But you will find more information on LinkedIn and on our channel.
Okay, we thought about having a guest, but not yet sure if it works. Is that the situation?
Sorry?
We thought about having a guest again, but not yet sure if it works. Okay, and now I remember. Okay, perfect.
But I think it should work, but maybe let's not raise the hopes. But we will have probably a guest again in 2 weeks, which is the 17th of April.
Same time.
Yeah, same time.
Perfect.
All right.
Thanks,
nice
Katherine.
to talk to you. All right.
Have a good time. Bye-bye, everybody.
You too. Bye.
Oh, I have to find where to